Hello, everyone who may be joining us from wherever you are, wherever you're at, for another webinar with the Canadian Association of Social Workers. Welcome. It is the first webcast of the new year, if it's your new year, 2021. We are so excited to be joined by such an incredible presentation today, and I'm so glad so many of you popped on and are letting us know where you're tuning in from. Please use that chat and Q&A function. It is for you. A couple quick housekeeping notes before we get into the bulk of the presentation. If you're a veteran to this webinar platform, you can disregard me for a couple seconds. If you're new, welcome. We are the Canadian Association of Social Workers. My name is Alexandra Zanis, and I am the Social Policy and Communications Coordinator here. This webcast is co-hosted with the Child Welfare League of Canada, so a big shout out to our partners at CWLC for helping to disseminate this important information. And for anyone tuning in who is a CWLC member, welcome. We're so happy to have you here today. So a couple quick housekeeping notes, like I had mentioned, everything on your screen is customizable for you. So if you would like to make the slides bigger, the video bigger, if you'd like to get rid of those housekeeping notes or announcements or move things around on your screen, please take a couple moments and do whatever is best for your viewing needs. If I were you, I would make the video big, the slides big, and then the question and Q&A section a little bit bigger as well. If you have technical questions, specific technical questions and/or questions related to the content, we will have a question and answer period towards the end where we'll try and get as many of your comments and questions as possible. Please use the Q&A tab. You have two boxes. You have a chat box and a Q&A box. The Q&A box is where we're going to be looking for content-specific questions or tech-related questions. The chat box is where you can use to discuss what's going on in the presentation, where you're tuning in from. I think there's a couple maybe discussion questions. That would be where you'd put them in the chat box. But like I said, please use that dedicated Q&A if you have specific questions that don't want to get lost in the chat. If you are looking for your certificate of attendance today, those are emailed to you. There is something called a course completion tracker and the bottom widgets. Those bottom widgets are where you can find virtually everything you'll need for this presentation. Once you've hit the required viewing minutes for this webcast, it is 40 minutes. That certificate will be emailed to you. You can always log on at another time. You can always log on at another time to access your certificate or finish the required viewing minutes. Once this presentation concludes, we go into a little bit of a converting period for the webcast offering. And then once it's converted, it's available on demand. So give us about an hour to 2 hours and you can log back on and rewatch this offering, share it with your peers, share it with your colleagues, et cetera, et cetera. So with all that being said, I'm on the back end here today. Please just let me know if you need anything. We don't have a tech, so we have limited tech support today, but I'm happy to do everything that I can to make sure this is the best webcast for you. This webcast is something that we are so grateful, and the CWLC is so grateful to be co-hosting with the group that authored this book, the individuals who have created this incredible project. And the point of this is to have as many opportunities to ask incredible questions of our presenters and use this opportunity to provide them some data and some comments regarding the work that they're doing. So please use the Q&A, please use the chat. So the Youth and Care Chronicles is a book that has been released on, you can purchase it on Amazon. The handout section will give you a couple little ways that you can engage with this project specifically. So feel free to click the handout widget at the bottom if you have a little bit more, if you have more questions about how to access this material. We are joined today by Cody. Cody Murrell is a supervisor with Children's Services working in Edmonton, Alberta. So for all of you Albertans I see tuning in on the chat, you are well represented today on this webcast. He's been working with children and youth who are in care for the past 7 years in varying capacities. Cody started his career working in the group care sector with multiple specialized group homes as a youth worker. He had also worked as a child intervention caseworker and generalist before becoming a supervisor. Cody holds a diploma of social work from Grant MacEwan University and a bachelor's of social work from the University of Calgary. Cody has extensive volunteer experience in the social work field, which includes volunteering as an Alberta College of Social Workers Council member, a worker at the Amenity House, and a co-chair of the Edmonton Youth Speak Out, a youth in care group which represents the interests of youth in care and seeks to inform practice through the sharing of youth's experiences. Cody Murrell is an advocate for youth in care and speaks publicly about his experiences, most notably at the high-risk youth conferences, at the University of Calgary, and Youth Power. His intense passion for the profession of social work and compassion for others stems from his own experiences with growing up in care. Cody has been happily married to his wife, Shay, for the past 3 years, and the CSW is just truly so grateful to have your voice, your expertise, your knowledge, your experience. Please take it away, Cody. Let us know how we can support you, but take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that lovely introduction, Alexandra. And hello, everyone, and good day. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to tune into this. I just quickly wanted to thank the Canadian Association of Social Workers and the Child Welfare League of Canada for helping make this webinar possible today. So as Alexandra mentioned, my name is Cody Murrell, and I am here to share. I'm here today to really share about the Youth in Care Chronicles, which the editorial team and myself have spent the past 3 years compiling. And in its essence is a collection of stories, experiences, and reflections from 18 former youth in care. I am also here today presenting on behalf of our entire editorial team, me just being one of those members, which includes myself, Penny Fraser, who's our lead editor, Dr. Dorothy Battery, she's a professor at the University of Calgary, Aaron Levesque, Dr. Battery's research assistant, Megan Moreau, and Teresa Tucker-Wright. Okay, well, just before I proceed any further, I just wanted to respectfully acknowledge that I'm located on Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 territories, the traditional gathering places for diverse Indigenous peoples of Alberta who have remained embedded in these lands for generations. I also want to acknowledge that many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have lived here and cared for these lands for many years. Okay, so just a little bit of a disclaimer and some information about the book and some of the proceeds. I just want to make it really clear that the ideas and viewpoints and opinions that I'm going to be sharing today are really are those of myself as well as the contributors, and do not represent any of the views of the Government of Alberta, Alberta Children's Services. Neither the Government of Alberta or Children's Services had provided any information related to the contents of this book. And just to let you know that all the proceeds from the sale of the Youth in Care Chronicles will be invested in future projects to benefit youth in care. In addition, I just wanted to point some attention to two of our big sponsors, which are CanFASD and the University of Calgary. So I just want to thank them as well. Okay, so some of the many important topics that I'll be further discussing in this presentation include an overview of the history of the Youth in Care Chronicles. You know, really, what is it? Why is it important? And how was it created? I'm going to be talking about the experiences of youth in care and the unique challenges that they face. So I'll comment a little bit about, you know, why youth enter care, what is child welfare, some different statistics and outcomes for youth in care. I'm going to talk about a little bit about my unique position in the book, as well as my own personal story, a bit about my personal story growing up in care. I'm going to provide an overview of the themes identified from the former youth in care stories that really impact professional social work practice through the book's learning guide. I'm going to talk about lessons learned along the way. So throughout this entire process, what did we learn? And at the end, I'm going to have some time for some discussion questions and just general questions and feedback. So please, if you have any questions, please add them using the chat feature in this webinar. You know, and know that I really greatly appreciate them. It makes me feel heard and that people were interested. So yeah, I really appreciate that. So moving on. one of the most basic questions that I want to answer is, what is the Youth and Care Chronicles, and why are we doing a webinar on it? And just simply put, it's a collection of stories, experiences, and reflections from 18 former youth in care. It is the reflection of a massive collaborative effort between many, many people. That includes the entire editorial team, all the 18 different youth who shared their stories as contributors. Our amazing sponsors and partner, FASD, one of our amazing consultants, Peter Smith, our partner for some of the artwork in the book. The Adoption Council of Canada's, our many endorsers and supporters, and just really a lot of people that offered advice and help along the way. The contributors in the Youth and Care Chronicles are really just so wonderfully diverse and unique. Each offers such a different perspective about growing up in care, with there being some shared common experiences or elements. And the contributors in this book, range greatly in experience. Some having lived in one placement most of their lives, and others living in 30 plus different placements by the time they hit the age of 18. The contributors range in age, they range in sex, orientation, race, and culture. So really just a diverse group. And although the contributors are all very diverse and many cultures are represented in child welfare, I'd be doing a real big disservice today if I didn't at least mention that despite that, the majority of youth in care today are of Indigenous descent, and that's really important to highlight. So in talking a little bit about the stories and the experiences that these youth share, the book really offers a rare glimpse into the real life stories and lived experiences of these former 18 youth in care, as told by them in their own voice, which is really key and important. Each of the stories in the book, they really highlight, the book more in general highlights the authentic stories, struggles, and triumphs of all the contributors, as well as provides a general understanding of the youth in care experience. So what is it like growing up in care? It provides intimate insights into the contributors' innermost thoughts and feelings, and provides a valuable tool for social work practitioners. So something that they can take away and use tangibly in their own practice when they're working with youth in care. The contributors share their stories from the time that they first entered care, sometimes a little bit prior to that, all the way to where they are now. And that could include, post being in care and not having any affiliation or any support with children's services, which also provides some interesting information on, what is their experience been after leaving care. The contributors really, again, they share their intimate experiences, both positive and negative, their pain, they share their trauma, but also their perseverance. They share what made a difference for them, their hopes for the future, and their reflections on growing up in care, such as, what made things better for them and how have their experiences impacted them today and still. The book and the stories do not shy away from talking about the harsh realities of growing up in care, which can often include being separated from parents and siblings for long periods of time, bouncing from home to home or placement to placement, struggling with addictions, mental health, a loss of culture and identity, and a lot of loneliness. The book also highlights some of the most, rarely shared success stories of former youth in care, which includes everything from them graduating from high school or post-secondary, working in various professions, many who are social workers like myself, some that are child and youth care workers, tradespersons, support workers, EMS workers, foster caregivers, and the list kind of goes on and on. It also highlights, some of the successes like, the former youth in care raising their own healthy children, supporting their families, living independently, and giving back to others and the community. So as part of all of these stories shared in the book, there are several aspects that make this book even more distinct than it already is, and special. And the first being that several of the book's editorial team members who helped create this book and shape the book grew up in care themselves. So that's myself, Teresa, and Megan, and two of the editorial team members who are also contributors share their personal journeys in this book, and that's myself and Teresa. And I think this aspect provides a truly, personal and authentic element to this one of a kind book. The second really distinct aspect of this book is it offers a perspective on child welfare and growing up in care across an entire generation, with the contributors ranging in age from being newly 18 all the way up until their mid 40s. So it provides a really nice look through time of what that's been like. The third being that the book offers a rare glance at several really fascinating relationship dynamics between a few of the contributors. So some of the contributors have a pre-existing relationship, and you can look at one story and the other story and kind of compare them, and it offers a really unique perspective, kind of a flip of a coin perspective, both sides. And the first one that I want to draw some attention to is kind of what I can best describe as a quasi mother / aunt and a quasi son / nephew type relationship. Both of them having grown up in care. So this relationship involves Teresa, who's on the editorial team, and Damon, who are biologically unrelated, but have become a part of each other's family. And a look at this relationship between Teresa and Damon provides an opportunity to explore just how important loving and caring relationships really are, and how family can be defined on just such a much broader level, and much more broadly than blood sometimes. The second kind of interesting relationship in the book that I wanted to highlight is the relationship between a biological mother and her son, who both grew up in care. This relationship actually involves my mother, Linda, as well as myself, who have really had to work hard on rebuilding our relationship. And a look at this relationship provides a scarce opportunity to explore, the intergenerational experience of growing up in care. Of a mom growing up in care and then a son growing up in care. The unique relationship dynamics between us as a result of that. Some good, but a lot of struggles, as well as the process and challenges of rebuilding that relationship, as an adult. And so, it just offers a really unique perspective. Although the book is primarily comprised of stories from former youth in care, which I've highlighted, it also incorporates some other really meaningful elements that bring an unparalleled awareness to the unique experience of youth in care, and understanding that experience. And it helps provide some valuable insights and again, some resources for practitioners. The first is the use of artwork throughout the book, created solely by former youth in care. It's scattered throughout, and you'll see that. The second is the use of quotes scattered throughout the books, which are taken directly from the contributor stories and really highlight some impactful statements. The third is the use of youth and care related articles. So there's articles regarding youth and care spread throughout the book, and this really helps enhance and strengthen the stories in the book, as it speaks to the youth and care experience on more of a national and global level. The fourth is the inclusion of a statistics page, which helps enhance the book by further providing some context about youth in care themselves. Why is it important to look at youth in care? And so the statistics page helps kind of very easily summarize why it is so important to pay attention to. The fifth is the presence of a transitions piece. So it's a few pages in the book, and it really speaks to the unique experience of transitions for youth in care. So that's everything, the experience of, living with their families, to now living in foster care, to bouncing around to homes, to aging out, to moving into adulthood throughout their lives. And so that paragraph highlights that. The sixth is the accompaniment of a glossary in the book, which helps enhance the book by helping to provide a shared understanding of certain terms or concepts that are likely, unless you have a lot of child welfare experience, are probably very, not well understood or esoteric in a lot of ways. So those are kind of the, six other just different things that I think really enhance the book and make it special. The final part, and just something additionally I'd add, is that makes the Youth and Care Chronicles just so amazing is the learning guide. And I'm not going to comment too much on it here, as I'm going to comment a lot more on it later on. So just hold tight on that. Okay, so that speaks to, what is this book? What are all of its different elements? Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about, why is the Youth and Care Chronicles important? I think a lot of you can kind of glean from what I've said about why it might be important, but I think there's some things worth highlighting that really make this book so significant and really groundbreaking. And the first, kind of key reason about why it's so important is that it helps spread awareness about the youth and care experience. And to the best of our knowledge, there is little to nothing like this book that currently exists, which was almost kind of shocking and sad for us in a way. It is a one of a kind, which isn't necessarily coincidental either. And so although we were shocked, we can understand, especially having gone through the process of helping create this book, that there's a lot of barriers to the creation of a book like this. The stories of youth in care have typically gone untold, which again isn't necessarily coincidental, as either youth in care often they often experience profound feelings of shame and guilt regarding their experiences, and the sharing of their story really requires them to open up and discuss some of the most intimate and traumatic parts of their lives. So a lot of us, keep that close to our heart and aren't usually offering that up in the form of a book or even verbally. And really, this book, in terms of spreading awareness, it helps make it easy to share, the common and differing experiences of youth in care. Because although there are a lot of common elements, there are a lot of differing experiences, and it's more of a better seen as a range. But it really helps share these in a clear way that another youth in care could understand and appreciate, that practitioners could understand, and that the general public could understand and relate to. The second reason about kind of why it's so important is that it helps give and provide voice to youth in care. And youth in care are one of the most marginalized groups in society. As a group, they tend to occupy really all the different sites of oppression, with them typically being, ethnic and gender minorities, young in age, lower class. They often don't have a ton of money, hence coming into care. Some having disabilities, and in general, they just really have limited control of their own lives. And they typically have some of the highest ACEs scores, and that's the adverse childhood experience scores. And as a result, they have some of the poorest health and educational outcomes, as well as experience, homelessness, suicide, human trafficking, at an increased and really alarming rate as compared to the general public. And all of these former youth in care contributors had such a strong and passionate desire for their voices to be heard. And there are few, if any, opportunities for youth in care to be able to share their individual voice, and even fewer to share their voice as a collective. And so this book really helps provide a platform to share these voices in a thoughtful and meaningful way, which really does help make it special. The third reason is that this book helps address some of the negative stigmas and stereotypes surrounding youth in care, which helps change the negative societal narrative around youth in care. So through the sharing of these stories, it helps challenge the negative stigma, stereotypes, and narratives surrounding youth in care, and really shifts it from youth in care being maybe seen as troublemakers, um, or being seen, but also youth in care feeling that they're troublemakers, that they're damaged human beings, to them having it being seen as people who have persevered and have survived. So that's really important. And the fourth reason being that really it was ultimately a response to a call to action from youth in care to fulfill an unmet need that was out there. And we just really had to listen. And like I mentioned prior, there's nothing like this really out there. And there was such an immense desire for these voices and these short stories to be shared for the potential benefits that they have. And this call to action that we heard and acted upon, fits so naturally with my own personal values and ethics, the values and ethics of the editorial team as a whole, and of the profession of social work, and really, in particular, the CASW values and ethics that weighed really heavily on the team and seemed to almost command us to ensure that the book was completed and seen to fruition. Were the respect for inherent dignity and worth of persons. And this was just crucial because many of the contributors have felt a substantial loss of their dignity and worth as they dealt with feelings of shame regarding their experiences. I personally have friends that I grew up in care with who have denied their experiences and lied. And, I have friends that have had relationships and serious relationships for 3 years with others, with their partners, and have somehow skirted saying, I grew up in care, and they had no idea. And they've concocted these wild stories about their family and their life, and just to kind of keep it under wraps. And so for me, that really just highlighted that, we need to help remove that and help, youth in care feel and know that they have dignity and that they're worth a lot. The next value was the pursuit of social justice. Again, I think this is kind of obvious, but it was a critical driving force, as the book represented like a grassroots opportunity to give voice to youth who represent one of the most marginalized groups in society. The next value would be the service to humanity. Not only was this important for youth in care, but it's also important for the greater society to know. And the last that really weighed on us was integrity in professional practice. And this was a major driving force, as it just seemed to be the right thing to do. And so, it was a shared sense among everyone. The fifth reason, but why it's so important, is the book provides an opportunity for healing. There is such a great amount of power and healing that comes from being able to share your story, verbalize it, write it down however you wish, and then owning it and taking control of the narrative surrounding it. And that just really helps with processing and healing. And kind of sixth and final reason that I'm going to share, at least, is that it seeks to benefit practitioners. The reason that these stories are shared is really to provide valuable insights. And that, accompanied with the learning guide, will really help practitioners, and it'll help inform practice. It'll help inform policies and legislation. So for other youth in care, it was hoped that this book helps spread awareness and letting them know that they're not alone, that growing up in care is not a death sentence, and that their experiences do not define them, and that there are many other youth in care who are successful. One of the driving forces behind that, for me, is exactly just that. And it's not knowing other youth in care have made it out and have been successful, because the stories are just shared in such a limited way. Growing up in care, I actually didn't know a single successful youth in care who had grown up, and I was determined to be the first one. I learned much later, but in my adulthood, by the time I was 20, okay, I wasn't the only one. And that just, that was really an eye-opening experience, but also very sad, Because if I would have known other youth in care had been successful, I think it would have helped me out a lot, and probably helped out a lot of other youth. So that's kind of for the youth in care, but for the practitioners, we really hope this book helps spread awareness in terms of providing, again, that further insight into what is that experience, like what is it like growing up in care, what works for youth and what may not work. So that's a little bit about what it is and why it's important. I'm just going to click to the next slide. And I thought it might be interesting and beneficial to share a little bit about the origins or the history and the process of building this book. And really, as I mentioned earlier, the Youth and Care Chronicles is a project that has been in the works for the past 3 years and has been a major collaborative effort. And it originates from the collective desire from numerous youth in care, including myself, to share these stories with the hope that sharing would benefit other youth in care. And kind of the preamble or the pre-book, the conditions that were in place that helped make this book possible. It really started when, or with several of the former youth in care contributors having previously spoken publicly about their experiences. Several others we knew that had a desire to, and several had volunteered with a local youth and care advocacy group that we were a part of, where they shared their stories and experiences via panel presentations. And a combination of, the many former youth in care already presenting publicly, and a deep desire to share these stories helped pave the way for the creation of this book. And as many former youth in care contributors continued to speak publicly, interest grew organically and rapidly. And before we knew it, the demand was too high to even meet. And we started noticing that a lot of the people presenting were experiencing fatigue from repeatedly and more often frequently sharing their emotional stories, and as a result reliving some of their past traumas. And it was really clear that these presentations were impactful and beneficial, but were ultimately not sustainable on their current trajectory. And in addition, we were starting to realize that these presentations were, again, great, but they had major limitations in terms of the number of people that could be reached by sharing them. Often it was confined to how many people would fit in a room, as well as the number of youth perspectives that could be shared at once, anywhere from kind of 1 to 3. And so in collaboration, we were able to come up with the idea of completing a book, as it was thought that this would help avoid all of these issues and help provide a broader perspective and reach a greater number of people. And that was really when the Youth and Care Chronicles had started its journey and had begun. The group had developed a detailed plan for the book, and with limited writing experience and knowledge and know-how in this area for all of us, a small group and myself, had set out to learn what we could. However, we soon realized that we were probably a little bit out of our league with this kind of project. It was bigger, it was more time consuming, and we knew we needed to get some help. And so we reached out to a few other social workers we knew with more experience in book writing, such as Jean Lafrance and Peter Smith, and they were incredibly helpful. They provided a lot of guidance and just really mentored us in a lot of ways, and they started to connect us to their connections. And for example, like Jean had connected us to Dr. Battery, who then partnered with the group along with her research assistant Erin. And that's kind of how this the editorial team got started. And Dorothy was able to connect with CanFASD, who agreed to help sponsor the project, especially given that so many youth in care have FASD, and it's important to highlight those stories as well. So Dorothy was able to help organize or Dr. Battery was able to help organize some of these some writing workshops for the youth. but we started to quickly learn that many of the youth really struggled to write down their stories. Um, and we're hitting a lot of blocks, and some did it very well, but there was a bit of a struggle, and ultimately the group had decided that it may not be the best way to maybe capture these stories. We want them directly from the youth, but maybe it's just not working as well. And so we had done some thinking and had come up with the idea that to capture these stories, we could maybe interview each youth about their experience, transcribe the interview so it's directly from them, and use that to help create their story or their chapter in the book, as each one of these 18 contributors are each their own chapter. And so at this point, Penny Fraser, who was a part of this project, was a volunteer with the local youth and care agent advocacy group, had been working with youth and care for 30 plus years, and was previously a journalist, was leading this project, and she was a great asset as she really helped us move this forward in a meaningful way. And throughout this process, the book remained a youth-driven and voluntary process where every youth had the opportunity to participate with the option to opt out at any time. There was no pressure to contribute or share more than they wanted, but they could share as much as they wanted. And the privacy of the youth, was respected, as they could use pseudonyms. And the privacy of the workers and agencies who supported these youth their privacy was also respected by not naming them. And so that was really important, that those privacy rights were respected for us. And all of the contributors had, in some way, a pre-existing relationship with someone connected to the project. And I think that really allowed for the creation of a lot of trust and safety for everyone who contributed. With all the contributors knowing very well that they could share their experiences and that the team would do right by them. And that through these elements and this process, many contributors had decided to participate, with 18 of them eventually seeing the project through. And as the project moved forward, new editorial team members were selected very purposefully to help balance out the team and enhance the project. We met weekly, we assigned next steps, and we tried to, make group decisions to ensure that there was best planning and really divide the work based on what was everyone's strengths, as everyone really brought different strengths and knowledge and experience. And so, who was best suited for what? And so we used that to help shape the book. The entire group kept moving forward, adapting to all kinds of changes, with the project shifting slightly, sometimes to make it more feasible or to enhance the book. And even if we didn't have all the answers at the time, and many times we did not, things eventually came into place as we worked as a team to get the answers and the information and the expertise that we needed. And with all of this hard work and strong teamwork and determination, plus a fair bit of stress over time, we completed this book and we got it published. And so that was just such a huge thing for us. So yeah, that's a little bit about the origin and the history of this book. Next, I just really wanted to share a little bit about child welfare in Canada, as I'm not sure what everyone's familiarity is, and a little bit about why youth why do youth come into care, and what is child welfare, and just a bit of information there. And I think that's just so important, as I'm not sure how understood it is. And so just briefly, child welfare is a term that refers broadly to child welfare agencies or systems, where a variety of services are provided to children, youth, and families under the authority of each province. So each province has their own child welfare agency or authority, which are really designed to help ensure that children and youth are safe from abuse and neglect, and that families have the necessary supports to care for children successfully. And child welfare authorities investigate and respond to allegations of abuse, and provide care to children and youth who are in their care. And child abuse is typically defined as either physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, as well as neglect. And the names of child welfare authorities vary greatly by each province or territory, and sometimes even within each province and territory. And depending on the jurisdiction or province or territory, child welfare authorities may be managed by the government or private agencies. And so it's kind of depending on the province, it'll vary greatly. And typically children and youth come into care, as a last resort, at least at that moment, when a decision is made that, a child or youth is unsafe and that there's imminent risk of substantial abuse to them. And so, yeah, I just think that's important to know. And children and youth typically stay in care when there maybe isn't any other alternatives identified that have been deemed safe. And so that's a little bit about child welfare and why youth enter care. Next, I had alluded earlier to some statistics that kind of really highlight, the importance of, why this issue or why this thing is so important to understand. And as I mentioned earlier, again, youth in care typically have some of the highest ACEs scores and, some of the poorest outcomes. But really, as you can see, and most of these stats are Canadian, or unless they're otherwise specified, but 52% of children and youth in care in Canada are Indigenous, despite representing, much less of the population, or 7% of the population. That 1 in 6 endangered runaways are likely trafficked for sex. That 67% of youth overall and 73% of youth who became homeless before the age of 16 reported in being involved with child welfare services. Youth in care are 3 to 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than the general population. And in Alberta, there was just over 16,000 children and youth that received child intervention services, which doesn't mean they were in care, but it does mean that there was some involvement. And that was just in 2019. And youth in care are 7 times more likely to experience depression. They're 47% of youth in care had completed high school, compared to the 84% of their peers in the general population between 2012 and 2013. And that was specifically in BC, but less than half, just about half, less than half of the general people in the general population who graduate or are graduating, and 54% of children and youth who had died by suicide received child welfare services in the previous year. And that youth in care are 5 times more likely to experience anxiety and many other things. And these are just, some of the many other stats. And, I do want to highlight that although these are Canadian stats, each province can vary and sometimes significantly. For example, like in Alberta, 70% of youth in care are Indigenous, which is a very high number, with that number being even higher in other provinces. And so, it's important to know and understand these different aspects and statistics. Okay. Well, next, I would like to just share a little bit, and that's me in that picture there. So you can see that when I was a little man, I was fishing with my folks, and I wanted to share a little bit about what it was like being a contributor and part of the team, as well as my personal journey. And so, I'd like to, again, just talk about the unique position I occupy as part of this project. Being a former youth in care, a contributor for the book, a part of the editorial team, as well as a social worker working in child welfare. And so there's a lot of different pieces there. And really, being a former youth in care, has allowed me to intimately, understand and empathize with the experience of the other contributors. I really do, I can get it. And this has helped me to identify with their strong desire and, even in myself, to share their stories, my story, in an authentic way. That's honest, unfiltered. There's no agenda behind it except just sharing and that will really help others understand and will hopefully help improve the experiences of other youth in care. And being a social worker, especially one working in the child welfare field, has given me the tools to help understand the child welfare system in a different way as compared to my experience growing up in care, and has given me the knowledge and tools to help empower myself, but also other youth in care. And being a part of the editorial team was just great, as it allowed me to help and shape my story and this book in a way that kind of melds my unique position, which I just thought was so great and so important. And although there was a lot of really great things, there were some challenges, and one of the biggest challenges I faced as a result of my unique position was that as a contributor, I was sharing some of the most intimate and devastating aspects of my life story for all to see, everyone. That included my coworkers, my bosses, my family. And I really worried what people would think of me. What would they think of my story? My perspective. I was worried, like, would they be upset? My family, would they be hurt? I didn't want them to feel that way. And would people think, would my coworkers and bosses think I was damaged or that I didn't belong in the field? And and all these thoughts were running through my head, and I'm sure similar thoughts were running through all the contributors' heads, and it really required a lot of bravery to share. And so, I'm still very happy to have shared and been a part of this project, as I think the benefits are just great. And I thought a unique touch would be, instead of just talking about this book and all the different aspects of it, which again are great, I thought it might be good to give you a really quick Youth in Care Chronicles experience by sharing a little bit about my story. And if I had a lot of time, I would give you a lot more, but because usually when I talk about my story, I can do it from anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. So you're getting the Coles notes, so keep that in mind. But I think I'm hoping that it'll be beneficial, and if not, at least interesting, in terms of helping to contextualize the book, highlight its importance, and deepening your understanding of the youth in care experience. And so just kind of the highlights is, that I first came into government care when I was 6 years old, and I aged out at 18 years old, but was supported financially and emotionally until I was 20 with children's services or child welfare. While in care, I attended 10 different schools and lived in 9 different placements, and that's 4 foster homes. I lived in a couple group homes. I lived in an adolescent residential treatment center, and then 2 semi-independent kind of living programs or apartments. In that time, I had hundreds of workers work with me, care for me. And my experience of growing up in care is, if I had to sum it up in one word, it's probably best described as chaotic. But despite that, growing up in care also gave me many opportunities and safety that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. And so, my journey really starts at 5. At this point, my parents had separated, and shortly after my dad passed away from a heroin overdose, I was grief-stricken as a little kid. I struggled to cope, and as a result, I developed even more behavioral issues, and some pretty severe ones, and I started acting out. My mom continued to struggle caring for me and my younger brother at the time, and with her increasing difficulties managing my behaviors, my mom, her developing addiction to crack and alcohol, and her struggles with mental health, she struggled to provide for us as a single mom and someone who grew up in care and a former high-risk youth, and as a result, she started engaging in sex work. And at the age of 6, these concerns eventually came to the attention of the child welfare authorities. And shortly after, me and my brother were apprehended or were brought into care and were placed in our first foster home. And, during this time, I remember being taken away from my home by who I only knew as a stranger, and being told that, hey, now you're going to be living here with this other stranger, who was my foster caregiver, and I just remember feeling, extremely scared, unfamiliar, and just being really unsure about, why am I even here? And at that age, you don't really understand, some of the complex dynamics at play, and um, it just really felt like everything that I knew had been taken away from me. And so at 7, I had been kicked out of my first foster home and moved into my second one. And there's a story behind that. But one day, at my second foster home, I remember coming back to to this home and not being able to find my brother. I remember searching for him and I just couldn't find him. I remember asking where he was and being told by my foster caregivers that he had moved to a group home. And I remember being confused, and I just then remember like a deep sadness just totally engulfing me, and just I'd been taken away from my mom, my family, and now the only person I had that I knew, um, I was taken away from again. And so, as this just sort of engulfed me, the sadness, it quickly evolved into an extreme anger, and I began destroying that house. And I really, and I only stopped when I was physically escorted into the basement, and not, at that time the lights were turned off. I was locked in the basement, and because I couldn't see anything, I slept on the floor that night, and until I was, woken in the morning by my worker the following day, and was immediately moved to my third foster home, where I stayed and had some really good experiences there. But between the ages of 9 and 11, I moved back with my mom. However, she continued to struggle with drug abuse and engage in sex work, resulting in all kinds of people coming in and out of the home, and some rather unsafe. Is also being left alone for extended periods of time. And at this point, I was raising my brother mostly, as my mom was locked in her room, often, under the influence, or, and kind of unable to care for us. My behaviors grew, and, I was often scared of the people in our home, and who were coming around. And I was, eventually I was diagnosed with ADHD, ODD, that's oppositional defiance disorder. I was diagnosed with a mood disorder and a personality disorder, as well as mild mental retardation, which is what they called it back in the day. Not my term, not a term I would recommend. I'm glad we've moved away from it, but that's what it was, and that's what's on my chart. And in hindsight, these diagnoses, are extremely troubling, and actually, very absurd. As I was diagnosed with these things at some of the worst times in my life, and when my world was so chaotic. And so at 11, due to the concerns, I was brought into care again and placed in my fourth foster home. At 12, I was made the subject of a permanent guardianship order. So, that because child welfare was basically my only guardian, and legally, and I was moved from the previous foster home and placed in my first group home. I felt there was no way out, and that life would not get any better. I had often dreamed at this point of dying, and not having to feel pain or hurt, and on several occasions I tried taking my life. But thank God, the staff intervened and stopped me from making this irreversible mistake. At 13, I moved into an intensive treatment center, got a lot of help in addressing my mental health and anger, and got some role models, and I stayed there till I was 15. I worked up towards going to community school and playing sports, and at the school and through playing sports is really where I met my adoptive family, who changed my life, and my life trajectory. At 16, I moved into my own apartment with a roommate, and kind of being sick and tired of growing up in care. I struggled a lot during this time, but had the support of my adoptive parents, friends, and child welfare. At 17, I graduated high school and started university in a general studies program with the help of my adoptive parents. And, this post-secondary really opened my eyes to the world and gave me just a broader understanding of my life and the things around me. Around 18, I started reconnecting with my bio mom as she started sobering up. 19, I enrolled in the social work diploma program, got my first job in group care. At 21, I graduated with a social work diploma, got a job in child welfare, starting off as an intern, enrolled in the BSW program, and first met who is now my wife. At 23, I graduated from my BSW, got promoted to a caseworker in child welfare. At 24, I got married. I got promoted again and as a generalist, and I bought my first house with my wife. And at 26, I got promoted again to supervisor, which is where I currently work, and I'm soon to be 28 in February. So that kind of brings us up to my story and just kind of some of the key highlights, and sharing stories like these and helping others to further develop an understanding of the youth and care experience is really like what this book is about. And my story is really just one of many different stories in this book, and many of and in life, and many of which have a very different outcome for youth in care. So yeah, so that's a little bit about my story. I hope that was helpful and interesting. Just in the interest of moving along a little bit, I just wanted to share a little bit about the learning guide that's a part of the book, and why it's kind of so important. And the heart and soul of this book is the valuable stories shared, and the insights gained and the lessons learned. And if these are the heart and soul of the book, then the learning guide would be the body, a tool that kind of aids that heart and soul. And with the majority of the book completed, like when we got to that point, the team wanted to further support an understanding of youth and care and critical thinking for people who work with youth and care practitioners. And the team had decided to develop the learning guide, which is how it came about. And through reflecting on the experiences and the stories of the contributors, provided just such a lovely opportunity for the editorial team to theme some of the key elements of each youth story, ask some critical questions about the themes, and engage in some knowledge translation to help inform practice for others engaged in this work. Working through this process enabled us, to develop the learning guide, which it helps inform best practice. That is grounded in the collective wisdom of all of these voices of adults who grew up in care, as well as practice wisdom of the editorial team. And it just so greatly complements these youth stories, and serves as such a powerful resource or tool for practitioners. And it's really hoped that it'll be able to be used to for practitioners to better understand youth in care, adapt their approach when working with youth in care, be a better ally for them, and just in general better support them. And through the book and across the youth stories, themes of relationships, advocacy, connections, transitions, and compassion repeatedly occurred. And these themes were used to focus, or as the focus of this learning guide, and were broken down into kind of three key areas. Further broken down, and it's what do professionals say, what do youth say, and what are some practice reflections. And given that these 5 themes were present in every youth story, it was so clear that they are essential to working with youth, and that they're just essential to working with youth in care, and as a result have some significant implications for social workers and others working with youth in care. And so the first theme is relationships. And this, and just really the importance of relationships. And for me, it was one of the most single important things in my life. And, relationships were responsible for the major positive shift in my life, as they allowed me to feel loved and cared for. And through them, I was able to be challenged to grow in a healthy way. And so you're going to see in the next few slides, you're going to see some of these themes broken down into the three categories. And so I'm just going to touch briefly on them. But for relationships, I should also mention that for each of these areas, these are just examples of things that are in the learning guide, and the learning guide is quite a bit more in depth. But just to kind of highlight, what it looks like, and to kind of, show you why we think it's so important. But for relationships, what do professionals say? They say strength-based, trauma-informed, and harm reduction practice approaches are key to working with youth in care. It's important to understand their histories, their responses to stressors, and to further strengthen a positive relationship with them. What do the youth say? Youth want child welfare workers to know they are still human beings with hopes, dreams, fears, and needs, even after a worker's shift has ended. They want to be treated as people and not as a problem. And, practice reflections, an example of, a good example of what one of the questions are, for this theme is, what have been the most meaningful relationships in my life? Encouraging practitioners to think on that. What made them meaningful, and how can I model that, for other youth that I'm working with? So just to, kind of give you that example. The next is advocacy. And for me, advocacy is what I needed as a vulnerable youth to ensure I was a priority, as a small part of a very large system. It is what made a big difference for me at many junctions in my life, especially when I was maybe, in my view, not treated, the most fairly. And, so what do professionals say? Workers should advocate for the youth goals, help empower them to advocate for themselves, embrace opportunities to support and develop their advocacy skills, as they need them. They're going to need them to be successful, not just in care, but in life in general. What do you say? Many workers remained passive during a very, many emotional and traumatic experiences, such as their apprehensions, and that they need workers to be able to be on their side, to be active, and to speak up for them and help them. And, one of the practice reflections is, why is advocacy important, and how can I help youth in care build it? Okay, I'm just going to go back for a second. Connections. For me, meaningful connections rather than temporary connections, help me out a lot. But, either way, connections as a whole taught me how to have normal relationships with others, which I needed to function as part of a healthy family. And, what do the professionals say? As workers, we are situated to help facilitate connections for youth to their culture, families, supports. And this means we need to be aware of intergenerational trauma, colonization, local resources, and know who we can reach out to for help if we don't have all the answers. What do youth in care say about connections? Many of the youth talked about the need to have long-term connections with workers, family, agency staff, just the importance of them and maintaining them. As so much in their lives have been temporary, and really permanency is important. The practice question, one of them is for connections is, how do I learn more about what connections, a youth would need in their life, resources, relationships, and just to start that journey of reflection. So the fourth, major theme that we found was transitions. And this is meant really in the broadest sense of the word, as I explained. And transitions for me were some of the most difficult times in my life, and sometimes represented make it or break it moments. Especially my transition to adulthood, which I needed a lot of extra support with. And so professionals say transitions are stressful at every age. Youth need both the space to make their own decisions and the continued support while they make their decisions. I think anyone knows who has transitioned to adulthood, you were not perfect. You made mistakes, and you had probably needed some people to bail you out at some point in time. And and I would just encourage you to think, like, where would you be if you maybe didn't have that? And so that's really what that's getting to. And what do the youth say? Many youth describe needing workers to be more involved, throughout their lives, really. And one of the practice reflections is, thinking back to a time when you experienced a big change in your life. What helped you be brave and successful and make it through this? What from your own experience could be applied to your work with youth experiencing a big change or transition? So, again, personalizing it, reflecting, and then being able to apply it is so critical. All right, the final theme is compassion. And for me, compassion is what gave me hope, and at times, really, the will to live and to keep fighting. And so what are professionals saying? Overall, it's an important aspect, or an important aspect of compassion is being intentional and honest. If you don't know what to do, or you made a mistake, you got to acknowledge it, apologize, move on. That's going to that's going to help build a relationship and show that you're compassionate. What do the youth say? They want professionals to know that they are more than just labels. They have interests and dreams and need to be nurtured. And small acts of kindness, such as going out for food, have a huge impact. And as often youth in care they haven't necessarily experienced that in their lives. So small things can make a really big difference. Practice reflection question for compassion is, what would the youth you are supporting say about how you interact with them? Good practice reflection, and that's going to give you an indication if you think you're being supportive, and if they think you're being supportive. What would they say you care about them? Or would they say, sorry, that you care about them? And if not, what could you do to help move that along? And so, as you probably noticed by now, the 5 themes are really strongly intertwined, with each theme, influencing and impacting the other, which really speaks to the positive and significant impact we have can have as practitioners through our work. Even just working in one of these areas or trying to help in one of these themes, it'll have effects that spiral in a very positive way. And these 5 themes suggest that some of the most impactful work we can do as practitioners is understanding and meeting clients where they're at. Sharing power whenever possible in decision making, being transparent and honest, and adjusting our approach, when needed to help best meet the youth's needs. And these 5 themes and these impactful types of work suggest that, at least to me, that some of the most effective practice approaches practitioners can utilize and embrace when working with youth in care are client-centered approaches, ecological, understanding them and their context, trauma-informed, anti-oppressive, and strength-based. And these different practice approaches are really are typically quite effective with working with youth in care and helpful. Okay, so just kind of moving along here. I know I'm just mindful of the time, so I might be moving a little bit quicker. But I wanted to share a little bit about some of the significant lessons that we learned, as I think they have implications for social workers, working with youth in care, but also others that may be interested in pursuing related projects with other marginalized groups. And there were so many lessons learned, but I wanted to highlight 4, key ones that I believe are of particular importance. And the first one was working with contributors. In particular, we learned a lot about, through the interviews completed, we learned about the need for regular check-ins and what draft copies of each youth story is required. For the interviewed, we learned through a lot of trial and error that giving the contributors a choice of how they wanted to put their story together was the best way to capture their stories. We found that many of the contributors struggled to write down their stories and preferred to be interviewed, and having those interviews transcribed but some preferred to write them themselves, and we just needed to be okay with that. And collecting stories in this way really gave the contributors control over their story. It assisted them as needed. It offered that assistance and ensured that their stories were directly from them and authentic, and that was really key. We learned that in completing the interviews, it was helpful to have the same interview questions to help, provide some uniformity and consistency in reading the stories. And that, these should be provided in advance. And this helps, the contributors be prepared, not caught off guard. It lets them think in advance about what they were comfortable sharing and what they were not. And that although there was this, some interview guide for the questions, there needed to be flexibility, and the contributors needed the ability to stray from that guide as they wanted. And this allowed for, a nice variance in the stories, honored the rights of the contributors and really gave them control of their own stories, which is how it needs to be. We learned that not all the interview deadlines could be completed as scheduled. Sometimes missed interviews or deadlines were the results of, contributors having things going on in their lives. Sometimes they were the result of the emotional toll, like knowing about, going into the interview, knowing what kind of toll it was going to have for them. And just knowing that, it meant that, okay, this may mean that my story is going to be shared publicly, which could put them in an even more vulnerable state. And so, just being flexible, is really important. And just acknowledging that it often had an emotional toll, for the contributors, but also the interviewer, who, was hearing these stories. And in order to complete these interviews, that trust and safety were prerequisites, and that the relationships that the contributors had with the entire team helped ensure that they felt safe and trusted the team with their stories. So still within, talking about working with contributors, we learned that check-ins are just important and that they need to be done regularly, as this helped ensure the contributors were, regularly updated, what was going on with their story, and that support could be given, as needed. In terms of the drafts, we learned that our process was very time consuming to complete and finalize. We found from start to finish, on average, it took about 15 to 20 hours for each contributor story to be finalized. And it included the time it took for the interviewee to complete the interview, transcribe it, review the transcribed story, have the contributor review it, and then have editors look at it. And so it was quite a lengthy process to do. And so to make sure that you make some time for that. That's important and then we also learned that's important for contributors to be able to review their drafts, to ensure that their story is being portrayed how they intended. And that just really knowing it's a back and forth process takes time. Okay, the next major lesson learned was around publishing, which required a ton of research. We knew nothing about publishing, book writing. We didn't know what options were best. And so we set off to learn about that and determine what was our best option given our circumstances and goals. Took many, many hours to identify all of these and to weigh them and consider and make a decision. But I think it's helpful to share a little bit about, what were some of the factors that we considered. And, one of them was cost. We had no money. So, when you have no money, it means you have few options. So something good to know. Accessibility. We considered what would give us the greatest possible chance to reach the most amount of people with these stories. We considered our ability. What's within our ability to pursue? We learned that a formal publisher could be very time consuming and add additional hurdles. We considered what options would give us control of the book, and going through a formal publisher, we may lose some of that control, which is really important to us. Goals and agility, how quickly could we get some of these done? And so in considering all of these, we decided to proceed with Amazon KDP Publishing, which had no cost, gave the team complete control of the project. It was within our ability to navigate as all volunteers. It allowed the book to be available worldwide, and allowed us to share these stories quickly. We ultimately made the decision to support the needs and desires of the former youth in care first and foremost. And, working with KDP, just additionally, it taught us there's a lot of information about how to format the book. There were a lot of supports actually offered through them, on their website and online resources. And so we could learn the ins and outs of publishing and all the different factors. We learned that it could take a while, to do it this way as you sort of navigate through this process. So yeah, those are some of our big learnings. The next one is working within a multidisciplinary team. Just in the interest of time, I'm maybe not going to read all of these, but please feel free to go back and give them a read when you can. But I want to highlight a few of them, and the first. Oh, sorry. And our team, the first one that I wanted to highlight is just our team was very diverse in experiences, networks, perceptions, and strengths, which added some hurdles, but also is really what ultimately made this project so great. And despite our differences, was the common glue that kept us all together. We worked on this project outside of work hours, held weekly meetings, tight turnarounds, and it was important to check in and just knowing that because of our various experiences and perceptions, we all had different strengths, which was just so huge and critical. Really we had the right people for the job, and it was just so great. So, there was a lot of lessons learned in that, and the importance of having the right people and reaching out and connecting to them. So the last major lesson learned is around adapting and being flexible. Really, it kind of, speaks a little bit for itself, but, much like our work as social workers, throughout this project, the team needed to constantly adapt to changing circumstances and being flexible. We had to adapt to things like losing and gaining contributors, making additions to the book we never realized we were going to, and near the book's completion, to kind of polish it. The youth struggling to write their stories and having to shift to interviews, delays, just due to schedules, changes in life circumstances. We had to be flexible with each other. We all had different perspectives and needed to compromise and figure out the best way to proceed. We were all different and had different things going on in our lives throughout the last 3 years. And we all learned many new things. And in learning new things, it just takes time. So account for that. And throughout the duration of this project, it shifted and evolved over time. As some things we wanted to do, we learned we couldn't, and other things at other times, new opportunities arose that we jumped on. And perhaps one of the most critical lessons I learned in this area involved the importance of being able to recognize when the current way you're doing things isn't working. And taking that step back and just being able to adapt and pivot so that you are always doing what works best. So those are just a little bit about some of the lessons we learned. I wanted to just share a little bit about the book now. To date, we're very blessed to share that there's been 300 books sold. We've helped spread the word organically, really, and that's all we've done. We have no money, so that's what you do when you have no money, and posting on social media, reaching out to our networks, our vast networks and different networks, and really through word of mouth it's been able to grow, and that 300 represents a huge achievement, because every single person that reads it and takes something away from it is then going to impact how many other people. We're lucky enough to have received some media interest, and just kind of through word of mouth and through some of our own efforts, and we completed some interviews with CBC, the University of Calgary, 770, it's Calgary radio station, as well as the opportunity to participate in this webinar, which we're just so honored to be able to do. There's been some implementation of this book in some university level courses already, and some interest, and people have reached out to us, and they think it's such a nice book to be able to study and learn about in their social work classes, especially child welfare and youth related classes. And there's been lots of feedback and impacts after the book was published, which is perhaps a whole other additional lesson learned and something to consider. But overall, it's been absolutely amazing feedback, very positive. And we're just very, very blessed. People have reached out to us about how the stories have impacted them, and made them want to revisit their own experiences, because they identified with the contributor stories, whether they grew up in care or not. They shared how much they learned, how inspirational they found many of the stories, how authentic. We've had other youth come forward wanting to share their stories. We've had practitioners share that they want to give the book to some of the youth they work with because they just know they need it. And so, some of those things have just been so amazing. So it's been really great. And that's just kind of a little bit about the book right now. I did want to mention that, although the book is being sold again, we price it as cheap as possible, and with the opportunity to make a few bucks so that we can use it to fund, other projects related to youth and care. And, just know that. But, the more important thing is getting out the word. And so as part of one of the handouts in this presentation, there's a sample copy of the book, and a very robust sample with the learning guide included. So please, download it, grab it, use it, read it. And I hope you, really enjoy that. Lastly, I have questions or feedback. So I guess I'd probably ask if Alexandra can join us, and just if you saw any questions throughout the chat or anything you wanted to share. I'd prepared some discussion questions depending on how long this presentation went on, because sometimes when I get speaking, I don't stop, and so I wasn't sure if I would have not enough time or too much time if I was nervous. So I did prepare some discussion questions, and it would be really helpful for me and the team if you could just go ahead and even answer these questions in the chat function. Probably the most important to me anyways is, what is the greatest takeaway you're learning from this presentation, and what will you really take away and incorporate into your own practice? So that's question one. If you have a chance, I would love to read them. I'm going to read every comment. And the next question would be, how might sharing lived experiences impact professional social work practice? The final question, what key messages do you hear from youth in care in your own practice if you work with youth in care? And just know that I've got Penny's information up here. And if you know someone who may be interested in participating in future related projects, love to hear from them. They can reach out to us. And there's a link there, just if you were interested in getting a copy of the book, like a paperback copy or a Kindle copy, you can go right there. So and thank you guys all. That's the kind of the conclusion of my formal part. So I'll just maybe open it up to questions and feedback.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cody. So just an FYI for everyone, there is a little bit of a lag on the system, so it might sound like I'm cutting Cody off or vice versa, but we're just all adapting to this new technology. I wanted to also flag that there's a survey function beside your course completion tracker. That data is really valuable for this group, so please fill out what is in that survey so we have a really compiled set of comments from you guys to give the presenters. So click that survey function and fill in those questions there. Cody, there are so many questions for you. There are a lot of comments about how impactful it was for not only you to share the story, but to see you doing the work that you are doing. So I think that was kind of the point. So that's amazing that we're seeing so many people respond with such incredible questions and comments. I'm going to give you a couple questions here, answer them to the best of your ability, knowing that these are really big conversations we're not going to tackle in 5 minutes. So, first question is in terms of aging out of care. Wondering if your group or through the stories you heard have any comments in terms of aging out of care, potentially in terms of transition planning and or strategic advocacy for the governments to be doing more for youth who are aging out of care.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother presentation. So, thanks for that. What I can share is, things that I've seen important to other youth and that were important in my own life. We're having those supports past 18. As we know, we're not all the smartest we ever were at 18. So, and make a lot of mistakes. And it is really important that, you're going to screw up and you're going to be sassy and rude sometimes. And, just as being a parent, you experience that with your kids. But, for youth in care, sometimes, they may disengage or be upset. And that results in them maybe not receiving services. And so I think it's important to be flexible and know that, and understand, when working with youth and care, especially transitioning into adulthood, that you need to give them some space. They need more guidance, not less guidance. Sometimes there's this thought, oh, they're 18 and things are good. They can figure it out, but really that is not the case. I needed way more guidance, um, when I was 18. Like, how do I navigate school? I was terrified of post secondary. I was the first one in my family that I know of that had ever set foot in a university. And that was hard and it was scary. I felt like an imposter. And so I needed people to be a sounding board for me. Um, and I also needed the financial support, because sometimes you're kind of given benefits. Depending on the province, they can be like kind of income support sort of related benefits, which are very limited, and others are um, are more substantial. But just know these kids are, and myself, did not always use the money well. And to understand that that's part of making the mistakes. I can personally tell you, I had some parties, I bought alcohol, not probably what you'd like to hear, but truth. And and sometimes I went over budget and I needed some help. But in terms of probably the most critical thing, not just for child welfare, um, important to transitioning is supports post 18. Who are the people that are important, to these, youth and these young adults? And are they connected? And make sure that they're connected, because those are the people, the unpaid supports are the people that they're going to turn to and they're going to get lifelong help from. Our roles are often very temporary, and we just need to know that. And so, yeah, just recommendations in general. I mean, the longer the support you can have for youth and care, the better. So, if that means supporting them until they're, you know, 22, 24, the longer, as a system, but also through informal supports. So I hope that answers that for you.
Yeah, for sure. And CWLC, the co-host of today's presentation, the Child Welfare League of Canada, is doing a lot of really good work in terms of national standards for aging out of care, and especially what the government needs to be doing in terms of moratoriums because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So take a look at CWLC if you have a couple more questions or comments about advocacy in terms of like national level advocacy in terms of like a national standard for aging out of care. Cody, another question for you. One of the big ones I've actually seen asked a couple times in the Q&A section is the conversations around building relationships that are founded in trust and vulnerability. Often between youth and a caregiver, but also potentially between youth in group homes, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have any like kind of tips or insider scoops or anything that came up during the book that talked a little bit about how you can foster those relationships of trust and vulnerability with the youth in care that many of us are working with?
Yeah, and I, the book does, like, in that practice guidance, that learning guide, it does actually go quite into detail about some awesome tips, and not just directly from seasoned professionals, but from the youth themselves. But yeah, just off the top of my head, like in my own work, as well as things that were combined with my own personal experiences growing up in care, the things that were the most important to me, um, and really led to strong relationships. It started off with interest. Take an interest in your youth, whatever they're interested in. Even if it's not a real big interest of yours, right? Country music, for some people, rock music, like whatever it is, and learn about it and talk to them about it. Sometimes it's anime, and just even if it's not yours, take an interest and let them know you've taken that interest and in their interest and who they are as a human. Ask how they're feeling. It's on. It's that simple. And you know what? You don't really have to overthink it. It's just what would you do in your own life to build a relationship? How have you built friendships? And that's kind of the starting point. And through that, you're going to get to know them. Help them when they ask you to, if you can. And if you can't, let them be very clear why you can't help them. They say that when you do a favor for someone, there's almost an instant relationship there. So, it sets up, it's a bit of a psychology thing, but it sets up a bit of a relationship, and go out of your way to show them that you care. And like I talked about before, small and insignificant things to us, like buy them a Slurpee, go for a walk, get them some candy, like not bribing them, but like just letting them know like you care about them as a person, and maybe once in a while, don't claim the receipt if you get reimbursements, because they know. I knew, I could tell, and I very much picked which staff I liked, and I can tell Youth and Care picked what staff they liked. Sometimes based on were they asking for the receipt, which meant they were going to get a reimbursement. So how honest is this relationship? And it made it feel like a paid interaction. And be honest with these kids, and that's even when it's tough. That's going to breed, a really strong relationship. It's okay to make mistakes. You're going to screw up. You're a professional. You're not perfect. And that's okay. Sometimes they say, oh, I made an error. They're going to trust you 1,000 times more than if you act like I'm the professional and I know everything. So don't do that. And those are just some of the key things that I would maybe give you.
Yeah, thank you. That's excellent. So many of the things you were saying, I was just like, it seems like it makes so much sense, but do we do it in practice? And do we do it enough, right? Okay, so I just want to wrap it up. We are kind of at our time here, although I know that there's so many great questions, and Cody and the team will get all these questions. Don't worry if we didn't get to answer them. But Cody, what do we do going forward? What's the next step? What's the plan of attack? How do we support you guys? How do we support this book? And how do we support more Youth in Care to continue to share their stories and give us the lived experience that will make us transform this profession to be better?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. It's a big question, and there's again lots of little pieces. The most simple thing that you could do is read a bit of the book and share it. So that other people have the opportunity, including Youth in Care, to know about other Youth in Care. So really that's helping us spread the awareness is huge. Yeah, if you want the book and you can purchase it, that's awesome, because that also helps us, although we're still applying for grants and stuff, it's nice not being beholden to anyone and, being able to do the true authentic thing, and it'll help us fund other projects. And, we have things like videos and, a part 2 that we're, just thinking about, because more youth have come forward. So that also helps. Yeah, in terms of moving practice forward, with Youth in Care, read the book. If at the minimum, read a couple stories in the learning guide. You will get so much, and you will be able to glean, so many strategies, in terms of working with Youth in Care, and just really understand them most simply as human beings. Sometimes, you treat them as your kid, depending on the role you're in, and let them know with that compassion. And, there are unique boundaries depending where you work. There are going to be things you can and cannot do. Don't focus on the things you can't do. Do the things you can do. So, so that would be kind of my little piece there. And if you have anyone interested that again, yeah, connect them to Penny. If you have any other questions that I'm sorry if we couldn't get to, email Penny. We will answer you back.
Wow, that is so lovely and kind, and what a great gesture. You may have more than you were thinking you were going to get in terms of people taking you up on that. So I hope you're prepared.
Very,
I wanted to
it's
say,
very
sorry, go
very
ahead.
easy to. Oh, I said it's very easy to offer up Penny's email.
Totally. So I just wanted to conclude with obviously a massive thank you. We are all just so grateful that you took the time out of your day to come and present and prepare this presentation. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes for these events that we put on. So what an incredible opportunity for the CSW to have such knowledge and expertise. This will be going on the YouTube. So for anyone who needs the closed captionings or would like just a more accessible version to share that doesn't require all the login information, it'll go on the YouTube, hopefully by end of day, but if not by end of day, tomorrow. This presentation, like I said at the beginning, will convert to on demand in about an hour or two, so you can log back on, rewatch, and or share on social media or with your peers or colleagues. The book and learning guide, all of this incredible information, resources should also be able to be found in the handout section, including the slide deck from today's presentation that includes the contact emails, the questions that they had posed in the discussion question, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, if you need that certificate of attendance, like most of you do, you will have to log on here to this platform, not for the YouTube, to access that certificate of attendance. So we're here at the CSW if you need us, but I want to give Cody the final words here. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of the CSW team and CWLC team. Thank you for sharing your stories and expertise. Any kind of final goings away?
No, I mean, really, the only thing is I just want to thank you guys all for joining it. It's so meaningful and impactful that you guys took the time out of your day to listen to this. And yeah, so just from the bottom of my heart and our teams, thank you guys.
Excellent. Thanks to everyone who signed up and showed up. Please fill out that survey. You'll get another window telling you to fill it out, and we will see you next time. Have a good night.